More weight. Giles Cory's voice is barely a rasp now. He's been lying in this pit for 2 days. The board on his chest supports approximately 350 pounds of stone. His ribs cracked hours ago. He can feel them grinding against each other with every shallow breath. The sheriff leans down. Will you enter a plea, guilty or not guilty of witchcraft? Cory's lips move. The sheriff has to kneel closer to hear. More weight? It's September 19th. 1692. Salem, Massachusetts. Cory is 81 years old. He knows exactly what he's doing. Under English law still operating in the colonies. If he refuses to plead, the court can't convict him, which means they can't confiscate his property. By dying under torture rather than trial, he ensures his sons inherit his farm. The sheriff signals, "Guards, add more stones." Cory's chest compresses further. Blood vessels in his eyes burst. His tongue protrudes from his mouth. The sheriff pushes it back in with a stick. And Cory whispers one more time, "More weight." This is execution as institutional policy operating through legal loopholes. Pressing wasn't technically punishment, it was coercion to force a plea. But when the coercion kills you, the distinction becomes meaningless. Today we're examining 20 execution methods so brutal that even societies comfortable with public torture eventually banned them. And we're not cataloging horror for shock value. We're extracting survival lessons because understanding how systematic violence operates, how it's justified, normalized, professionalized, and eventually delegitimized helps you recognize when contemporary systems are following historical scripts. Let's start with a method that reveals how religious authority transforms murder into holy duty, and why theological justification makes violence nearly impossible to stop through rational argument. Number 20. Burning at the stake. Medieval Europe through 1789. This wasn't just execution, it was forced salvation. Medieval Christian theology taught that fire purified souls, that flames burned away sin. So burning heretics wasn't murder, it was spiritual mercy. You were being saved despite yourself. This theological justification made the brutality not just acceptable, but holy. Executioners weren't killers, they were agents of divine grace. In 1553, Queen Mary, the First of England, burned nearly 300 Protestants for refusing to accept Catholicism. The process was deliberately prolonged. Green wood that smoked heavily before igniting. Victims tied high on the stake, so flames reached feet first. Working upward, slowly, crowd gathered to witness purification. Some prayed for the condemned. Others threw additional fuel. The last legal burning in England was Catherine Murphy in 1789. Executed for petty treason, murdering her husband, killing a superior in the social hierarchy. What makes burning particularly insidious is how theological justification eliminated moral restraint. When you believe you're saving someone's eternal soul by destroying their temporal body, cruelty becomes compassion. The screaming isn't suffering, it's purification. This pattern repeats across history once violence gets sanctified. Its scale becomes limitless because participants believe they're serving higher purpose. The survival lesson regimes combining violence with religious or ideological justification are most dangerous because you can't reason people out of positions they didn't reason themselves into. When authorities claim divine mandate, appealing to ethics or mercy is futile. Your only protection is avoiding their attention entirely or fleeing before accusations formalize. Number 19. Drawing and quartering. Medieval England 1283 1880. The full process dragged through streets behind horse-drawn, hanged until nearly dead, but cut down while conscious, disemboweled while watching your own intestines removed, castrated, beheaded, body quartered, cut into 4 parts, parts displayed in different cities, reserved exclusively for high treason. The last legal sentence was 1,820, though by then the full brutality was rarely carried out. Final formal abolition came 1,870, but notice the gap. The legal language remained in force for decades after the practice stopped. This reveals something crucial. Sometimes the threat of torture is more effective than actual torture. Keeping drawing and quartering on the books created legendary deterrence without requiring resources to actually perform it. Potential traitors calculated risks based on spectacular punishments that might not even happen anymore. Survival lesson. Authoritarian regimes benefit when populations believe in punishments worse than what's currently practiced. The fear alone achieves compliance without expenditure. Learning to distinguish real threats from legendary ones helps assess actual risks versus propaganda designed to paralyze through terror. Not every horror story about regime brutality is currently operational, but determining which are active versus which are maintained as psychological weapons requires careful observation of what actually happens versus what's threatened. Number 18. Breaking wheel. Europe through 1841. Victim tied to large wooden wheel. Executioner uses iron bar to systematically shatter every major bone arms. Legs, ribs. Breaking occurs in public, so crowd hears each snap. Victim left on wheel to die from shock. Blood loss or exposure, sometimes taking days. Bodies often left displayed as permanent warnings. What's significant, this method persisted in Prussia until 1841, well into the Industrial Age. During a period of Enlightenment ideals, scientific advancement, social reform. The persistence of medieval brutality into modernity reveals that progress isn't inevitable. Old cruelties can coexist with new technologies. The survival lesson: don't assume modernity guarantees humane treatment. Systems can industrialize, modernize, even democratize while maintaining barbaric punishment practices. The coexistence of torture with progress isn't paradox, it's pattern. Understanding this prevents complacency. Number 17. Boiling alive. England 1530 King Henry VIII enacted law in 1531 declaring anyone convicted of poisoning would be boiled alive. The symbolism death by the medium of their crime poisoned food, drink. First victim Richard Roos. E10 Wubai Censure R. Convicted of poisoning porridge. But the law lasted only 16 years. Henry's son Edward VI repealed it in 1547. Recognizing that even in an era comfortable with public executions, this was too much. This case illustrates interesting dynamic laws born from desire to send messages can become so horrific that even harsh governments reconsider when the spectacle overshadows the lesson. Boiling was so viscerally disturbing that crowds reacted with horror rather than righteous satisfaction. When punishment becomes more shocking than crime, it loses legitimacy. Survival lesson: elaborately cruel punishments can backfire by delegitimizing the regime that employs them. This means sometimes enduring worst cruelty without breaking, like Giles Cory, can turn torture against torturers by exposing their brutality in ways that shock even supporters. Number 16. Impalement. popularized by Vlad III the Impaler. 1400 secondo Wallachia. Sharp stake inserted through body, usually rectally. Driven upward to exit through chest or mouth. Process was slow. Victims could survive on stakes for hours or days. Vlad reportedly impaled tens of thousands as psychological warfare, creating forests of impaled bodies visible for miles. But here's what matters. Whether Vlad actually impaled tens of thousands or the number was, propaganda doesn't change the function. The stories created such terror that enemies surrendered without fighting. Legendary brutality achieved strategic objectives, whether historically accurate or exaggerated. Survival lesson. Sometimes the most effective torture is the one that never happens because everyone's too terrified to risk it. When authorities cultivate reputations for extreme violence, whether fully justified or partially mythological, they achieve control through fear rather than actual resource expenditure. Understanding this helps distinguish between real threats requiring immediate flight versus psychological warfare designed to paralyze you into submission. Number 15. Keel hauling. Dutch Navy Tissits Peitstos Tissitso Semsto Peit Desiatri. Sailor tied to rope passing under ship's keel. Dropped from one side. Dragged along barnacle-encrusted hull underwater. Pulled up the other side. Lacerations from barnacles. Drowning risk. Head trauma from striking keel survival was rare. Why persist for 300 years? Naval environments are isolated. Authoritarian. With no external accountability. At sea. Captain's authority is absolute. Brutal discipline maintained order when mutiny meant death for everyone. This reveals pattern-confined environments with no escape routes, ships, prisons. Remote colonies develop uniquely harsh punishments because victims can't flee and external observers can't intervene. The survival lesson environments where authority operates without oversight are most dangerous. When you're considering positions or locations that isolate you from external accountability structures, ships, remote facilities, closed institutions understand that your safety depends entirely on those in immediate power. No appeals process, no witnesses, no escape. The calculation must be different than in societies with multiple power centers and accountability mechanisms. Number 14. Garrote. Spain, early 1800s, 1974. This one's shocking, not for the method, but for the timeline. Victim placed in chair with iron collar around neck. Tightened by screw until strangulation. Relatively quick. Minimally public. But it remained Spain's official execution method until 1974, just 51 years ago. Salvador Puig Antich was executed by garrote in 1974. Spain didn't abolish death penalty until 1995. The recent continuation of medieval execution technology into contemporary era teaches crucial lesson cultural practices can persist decades or even centuries beyond when surrounding societies abandon them. Geography matters. Political systems matter. Religious traditions matter. Just because most of Europe moved away from capital punishment doesn't mean all of Europe did. The survival lesson: never assume your location has adopted prevailing contemporary standards. Always investigate actual laws, actual practices, actual recent cases. What's normal in neighboring regions may be illegal where you are, or vice versa. Cultural lag is real and can be deadly if you assume progress is uniform. Number 13. Flaying alive. Neo-Assyrian Empire 934 to 609 BCE and sporadically elsewhere. Systematic removal of skin while victim remains conscious. Assyrian kings documented this in palace inscriptions as demonstration of power. Flayed skins displayed on city gates. This served dual purpose: punishment of individual and psychological warfare against entire populations. King Ashurnasirpal II, 883 to 859 BCE, recorded, "I flayed as many nobles as had rebelled against me, and draped their skins over the pile of corpses. Some I spread out within the pile. Some I erected on stakes upon the pile. I flayed many right through my land, and draped their skins over the walls." This isn't private sadism, it's public policy, documented in official royal annals. The survival lesson. When regimes document their brutality in official records carved in palace walls, recorded in state archives, they're creating evidence that will eventually be used against them. Short-term documentation serves propaganda purposes. Look how powerful we are. Long-term, it becomes testimony condemning them. This pattern repeats: Nazis keeping meticulous concentration camp records, Inquisition trial documentation, medieval torture accounts. Authorities documenting violence create permanent evidence of systematic cruelty. Number 12. Dismemberment by horses. France through 1757. Reserved for regicide or attempted regicide. Victim tied to 4 horses, each attached to a limb. Horses spurred into action, tearing body apart. The last public dismemberment: Robert Francois Damiens, who attempted to assassinate King Louis XV. His execution was so brutal, taking hours as horses struggled to tear limbs, requiring executioners to cut partway through joints, that it shocked even execution-hardened Parisian crowds. The spectacle backfired, generating sympathy for Damiens and revulsion toward the monarchy. Within decades, France moved to guillotine as humane alternative. Survival lesson. Executions so brutal they shock, even supporters can delegitimize regimes rather than reinforcing authority. This is why Giles Cory's pressing worked as resistance. His refusal to break while enduring maximum cruelty exposed Salem authorities' brutality in ways that contributed to ending witch trials. Number 11. Pressing peine forte et dure. Medieval England through 1772. Notably, 1692 Salem. We opened with Giles Cory for a reason. His case teaches strategic resistance. Pressing wasn't officially punishment, but coercion to force plea. Stones gradually added to board on victims' chest until they either pleaded or died. But why refuse to plead? Because under English law, conviction required plea. No plea equals no conviction, equals no property confiscation. Cory endured 2 days of crushing, maintaining more weight response to every demand for plea, ensuring his sons inherited his farm. His death was so horrifying that pressing was never used again in America. This teaches that sometimes strategic death accomplishes more than tactical cooperation. When systems are designed to destroy you regardless, choosing how you die can protect what matters and delegitimize persecutors. Number 10. Immurement walling alive. Various periods and locations. Sealing person in confined space to die from starvation. Dehydration. Suffocation. Roman Vestal virgins found guilty of breaking chastity vows were immured in small underground chambers with minimal food. Persian authorities immured rebels, leaving only heads exposed as public warnings. Some instances continued into 20th century. The psychological horror being sealed in darkness, knowing death will take days or weeks, is perhaps worse than physical pain. This represents torture that destroys mind before body. Survival lesson. Punishments designed for psychological destruction rather than physical pain reveal regimes understanding that breaking will is more effective than breaking bodies. When you see interrogation or punishment techniques focused on isolation, disorientation, helplessness, you're dealing with authorities who've studied how to destroy human spirit. These are often more dangerous than overtly violent regimes because psychological damage is harder to recover from and leaves no visible evidence. Number 9. Poena Culae, penalty of the sack. Rome through 1761. Reserved for parasite-killing parent. Victim sewn into leather sack with dog, roaster, monkey, and snake. Then thrown into water to drown. Animals chosen for symbolic significance, dog shame. Rooster, lack of courage. Monkey mockery of humanity. Snake deceit. Rarely used but persisted in law for centuries, with last recorded instance 1761, astoundingly late for such bizarre punishment. This reveals how legal frameworks can maintain archaic practices long after they fall into disuse. The survival lesson. Don't assume laws on books aren't enforced just because they seem outdated. Rare punishments can be revived when authorities want to make examples. Always research what's technically legal versus what's commonly practiced, because the gap can be deadly if you become the exception. Number 8. Stoning. Ancient times through present in some regions. Victim thrown from height. Then crowd hurls stones until death. Deliberate rituals govern the process. Key insight. Stoning is communal execution involving crowd in killing.